of course, we have been following a lot of what's going on in Syria today. The U.S. President Barack Obama spoke extensively about that during his end-of-year news conference. 7,500 civilians and rebel fighters have been evacuated from the besieged city of Aleppo in Syria. But according to Turkey's foreign minister and also according to the UN, thousands of people are still trapped in East Aleppo, children as well. We're going to bring on Kevin O'Leary now, as we always do on Fridays, Mr. Wonderful on Shark Tank, and the chairman of O'Leary Financial. Good afternoon.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Mr. O'Leary, what do you make of this situation right now in Aleppo? What should Canada be doing here?
You know, it's a tragedy, obviously, but you think about the unique attribute Canada has and a long history in the Middle East, starting in Cyprus back in the 60s. People think that peacekeeping is easy. It's not. Peacekeeping is one of the riskiest and most difficult challenges any military faces, because obviously what is needed desperately in Syria is to bring some stability there, number one, and then keep the peace. And I'd argue the number one role we could have, because we have the moral equity in doing this, and we are Canadians, is that when this thing stabilizes, we could provide some peacekeeping services there. And believe me, the Syrian people are well aware of what happened for decades in Cyprus between the Turks and the Greeks. We could provide that service, and we were, if you go ask Cypriots today, either side, in the north, the Greeks, or the Turks in the north and the Greeks in the south, the reverence they have for Canadians is remarkable. They know and remember the history and the challenges, and believe me, the bullets flew back and forth, and Canadian peacekeepers stabilized that island, and it's now very successful economically because of that.
When do you think we should be doing that?
It's not. We're not ready yet. That country is still in turmoil. And in a very difficult situation in some ways, because you've got administrative change in the United States on January 20th, and we're going to have a complete change in the mandate and who's going to be running that militarily in terms of how that's going to be dealt with. I would think, in the months ahead, we're going to get some stability. This has been a flashpoint and a horrible outcome for humanity. But Syria itself has to get to a place of stability. The thing about civil wars like this, it's almost a combination of terrorism and civil war. It's horrible, but it burns out when enough suffering has occurred, and we're getting to that place. People just don't want to suffer there anymore, and they want to stabilize. And even the rebels there are getting decimated by this process. So it's horrible. But when, we'll know, and I think it's going to be sometime in the next 6 months, we should offer our services as Canadian peacekeepers.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are thinking about that and thinking that surely Canada can be doing something more to help the people in Aleppo. You're talking about sending peacekeepers. How many do you think we should be sending?
Don't know. It depends on where we're going to be drawing those lines. You think about each region, each situation is different because we don't know where we have to stabilize. It's a fluid situation, but the point is, if there's anybody that has the moral brand to do it, if there's any country on earth, it would be us, maybe the Swedes and the Danish, but very, very few countries enjoy the reputation we have in the Middle East. And those peacekeepers that, served decades ago, we owe them a huge gratitude because they built that equity. Canadians are known as peacekeepers above all, and not war. There's nothing proud about being a warrior. The war is a desperate outcome for a human being. Peacekeeping is extremely noble.
Okay, I just want to shift gears here now. Kevin O'Leary is on the line. If you're just tuning in right now, he's Mr. Wonderful on Shark Tank, the chairman of O'Leary Financial. And we were chatting with Evan, the usual host of this program, just before you, looking back at the last session of Parliament. A time at the end of the year to look back at what was accomplished, the wins and losses for the government, the cookies and coal, as Chris Sims has put it. What stands out to you, and who's on your naughty list this season?
I don't see any achievement by the metrics that I measure for this country. 0.9% GDP growth is a disaster. We can't run the country on that. Canada doesn't work at 0.9% GDP growth. We can't support our social net we've promised for our country, number one. Number two, we can't support our educational programs and mandates, and we certainly can't support health care with 0.9% GDP growth. that outcome is terrible. So this government has not done the number one job. And when it came into government, its number one job is to provide an economy that supports the Canadian way of life. They have failed miserably. I give them a -6 grade out of 10. They've done a horrific job. You know, what I'm learning, and, you know, obviously I'm critical of this, but Trudeau, the things he does, selfies, giving away our money to other countries before he takes care of Canadian jobs. You know, this scandal, the Trudeau Foundation. I mean, I'm sick of this stuff. This hurts our Canadian brand. Raising money from people. I'm asking you this simple test. Anybody listening to this, do you think anybody would give Justin Trudeau $50,000 if he wasn't the PM of the country? Not a chance in hell. And so what do they expect in return for that money? I'm asking that question. And by the way, that $125 million that Chrétien gave, might even know about that on behalf of Canadian people. I want that money back. I'm a taxpayer. I never wanted to invest in the Trudeau Foundation. I want that money back right now. What's it doing there? Why isn't it helping Canadians get jobs? He deserves to fry like an ant under a microscope now for doing this. This taints our country. This is poor and weak management, and it's a horrific mistake. This is a neophyte blowing himself up. He deserves this criticism.
Kevin O'Leary, he's got a long naughty list this holiday season. And just before we let you go, you know, you've also got a statistician and a strategist. From what I understand, it seems like you've got all of the ingredients here for throwing your hat into the Conservative leadership ring. And I've got to ask you once again, I feel like I'm asking you every week now, are you ready to pull the trigger?
I'm ready to pull the trigger, but I'm simply waiting now. There's such an interest in this leadership race in terms of new candidates because they smell blood in the water. Trudeau is going to be a one-and-done prime minister because he's failing the economy so badly. So we've got 14 people here. We're going to have 2 more next week, apparently. So 16. You can't have a debate with 16 people. You can get a 10-second soundbite. I'm simply waiting. I'm just waiting for the herd to call. And I'm thinking at some point, some of those 15 are going to, or 14 or whatever it's going to be, are going to drop aside. And when you tell me when we're down to 5, tell me when that's going to happen. We don't know, but it's going to be coming to a theater near you. And that's probably when I'm going to pull the trigger.
All right. We'll be watching and waiting. Kevin O'Leary, thanks for joining us.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful on Shark Tank, still waiting to pull the trigger. Seriously, he's got all of the ingredients. A statistician, a campaign manager. He doesn't need the name recognition, as he's pointed out many times with us before. Funding isn't a problem.
Nope.
He's waiting and watching, biding his time, waiting for the herd to thin out.
I think the news in that interview is that he said in the next 6 months or so that Canadian armed forces should be peacekeeping in Syria, and also that the military in Canada aren't known to be warriors. That's a major political divide. And so very interesting that he said that.
And, you know, he is a big name in this leadership race.
He really is.
So interesting to get his take on that he thinks next 6 months
we should be
doing more, that we should be moving in, and we should be doing something to help stop the suffering in Syria.